what I would certainly advise researchers is to think about your stakeholders to start with. So there are, I think it's been well described also, doing a stakeholder analysis is all about who are the stakeholders that are interested in what you do. Of course, also, who are the stakeholders that are impacted and potentially also negatively impacted, because there is always, there is often, both sides on every story. It's not always about positive impact. It might also be about negative impact. So think about that as well. And then, of course, the last point is leverage. How do you include those stakeholders who also have a certain amount of power to change things? Now, of course, this is not always easy, because as a young researcher and even a senior researcher, you do not always have the networks, you do not always have the access to the big policymakers or the politicians who make the decisions. So we have to be a little bit humble in this respect. But of course, if you want to have an impact, if you want to have change, you have to think about your strategy. How could your research change, and what is then the pathway to impact? How will I get there? Who can help me with that? What is my communication strategy? What are the tools that can help impact arise, like organizing trainings or making videos that you put on YouTube, things like that. So you have to think about your strategy. I think also another issue is the issue of a budget. If you have a budget, spend it wisely. And I always advise people to also involve stakeholders in assigning a budget. If you want stakeholders to really help you achieve impact, they also often need resources. And this is not always the case, I see. So often you have, we as researchers, we are often paid to do what we do. And then at a certain moment, we are enthusiastic and we want to involve stakeholders, but they do not always have a direct benefit. So you have to think about what's in it for them. How can they use your research? Why would they work with you on this? So that's, of course, also, I think, a very important aspect to try to actually assess what are the needs of my stakeholders, and are they actually willing to be involved in what are often quite intense processes. And then once you achieved in bringing people together, and this sounds a bit silly, but also make it a little bit fun. Make sure that you offer them a meal, or try to, and of course, luckily, Corona for now is a bit out of the picture, so we can come together. Actually, in our project of the youth in the city park, we were only we could only see each other for the first time when the project had already ended due to Corona. So this was also an important barrier, because it really matters also. And again, it's about building trust, doing some nice things together, having a laugh, getting to know each other also on a more personal level. So these things are important as well. And then, as I already mentioned, think about the boundary object. What are you going to do together? How can you bring people together to work on a common challenge, basically? As I also said, failure, it's part of the deal. It will happen without any doubt, even if you have a fantastic plan, even if you use a theory of change and you have described your impact pathway, and it will never go as you put it on paper in advance, if you, of course, already had a plan in advance. So be aware of that. And also, of course, during collaborations, there are always interpersonal problems between people. So it helps if you have some skills to manage that as well. I would always advise, do not solve problems by email. If there is an issue, if there is a high amount of emotion involved, put people together and have a chat face-to-face with each other, because that really makes a difference. And once people sit face-to-face, they are often much more reasonable than when you just start sending out mails with lots of other people's reading along. That's not the way to go. So think also about how you might want to solve problems during the process. And then, maybe finally, one more thing is about the feedback loops. Give feedback to people and make sure that they are connected, and that they don't get frustrated at a certain moment because they feel they are left out, or their voices are not heard. For example, also during our co-creation, sessions, we had people also vote. So at a certain moment, we developed how can we solve a specific problem questions, and everyone was allowed to develop these questions, to write out these questions, send them to me, and then at a certain moment we voted on what do we believe is the most interesting, how can we question to continue it. And this of course generates a feeling of equity. People have a voice, they all have a say in this. And this is, I think, also something which you should think about. What are the power relationships in a collaboration? Do people perceive themselves as equal when they compare themselves with others, or are there implicit power relationships? So it's important to keep that in your mind as well. Some people, this was also something which we struggled with. I said, like, okay, you have to involve end users, and in our case, these were youth. But of course, you cannot just drop youth in a process where they are suddenly surrounded by 8 professionals and have to think about solving the problem in the park. So it sounds like a good idea, but in reality, it is much more complicated to get end users, or in our case, youth, involved, that are also often living in very challenging circumstances, for example. So I think these are some things to think about when you start a collaboration.